100 before. Yesterday we spoke about the way to permit to draw water from the sea, which is Carmelit, to the ship, which is a private domain. And now comes a question about how to pour water from the ship into the sea, the wastewater. אמר לי רב נחמן בר יצחק לרב חייא בר אבין, so לרב חיסדא ולרב בר אבון, according to these two sages, the Amrei, עושה מקום ארבעה ממלא, they hold that the water in the sea is Carmelit because we measure it from the surface of the water, not from the floor. So they require an enclosed area 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim, like to create a private domain, which virtually goes down to the sea, and then that's how you can draw water from the private domain into the private domain. So that's a solution to draw water from the sea. But how can one pour its wastewater? You cannot throw it overboard because the surface of the sea is Carmelit. So you cannot throw it directly from the private domain from the ship to the Carmelit. So through the same partition you can also. So he says, if you say that he pours them out into that enclosed area, that would make it repulsive. The water. Yeah, how can you? No, but how can you pour the wastewater through the same place which you draw the water, the drinking water? Salt. If you're in the Kinneret, it's like drinking water. So washing water, yeah. If you're less than 3 tfachim from the water, no, but still, since you took the water from the ship, which is a private domain, and you put it on the sea, which is Carmelit, that should be forbidden. Even if you place it directly, it should be forbidden. So the answer is to do it indirectly. The shadilu adafna despina. The solution is to pour it on the outer wall of the ship and let it run down into the sea. Then it should be okay. Why? No. A pipe. If the pipe goes to the sea, so then it's still directly. It has to. You have to pour it on something and let it just. With an angle, a pipe with an angle that. So that could be like the side of the ship. That's maybe comparable to the side of the ship. So that's a question. They ask a question: how can one actually open the tap in the house if it brings the water from the public domain into the house, which is a private domain? How is that permitted? That's So I think it's because it's indirectly, like this. And the Gemara is asking, what about the person's force that brings about the wastewater's passage into the sea? So even though he doesn't pour it directly into the sea, but indirectly it does, the answer is that since the sea is Carmelit, kocho b'Carmelit lo gazru. The entire concept of Carmelit is a rabbinic decree. So the decree does not apply to it transferring through one's force, only to a direct transfer. And how do we know that? Umena Taimra, the Tanya, the Braita says, Sfina, a ship, ein metaltelin lo mitocha layam velo min hayam letocha. One may not carry neither from inside the ship into the sea or from the sea into the ship, because that would be transferring between a private domain, the ship, and the sea, which is Carmelit. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, amuka asara ve'en gvoa asara. In case the ship is 10 tfachim deep, inside the ship we have a wall of 10. You can see the wall of 10 tfachim of the ship, but it's not 10 tfachim high above the water because the ship is a little in the water. So metaltelin metochalayim, you may carry from the ship into the sea, but not from the sea into the ship. And the question is, why should there be a difference? If there's a prohibition to carry from the sea to the ship, because it's from Carmelit to the private domain. How can one be permitted to carry from the private domain to Carmelit? Why is there a problem to carry from the sea to the ship, to כמטלטלין מכרמלית לרשות היחיד? If so, מתוכה לים נמי, from the ship to the sea, should also be forbidden. כמטלטל מרשות היחיד לכרמלית, that would be carrying from a private domain to Carmelit. So we must say that the permission is אל עליו לאחודה, to transfer via the ship's rim by pouring something on the top of the ship's wall and letting it flow to the water, to the sea. Only then it's okay. So that's another source that that there's no decree against transferring through one's force from a private domain to Carmelit. Why not? Rabbi Yehuda, no, Rabbi Yehuda, he's the one who says that. Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Yeah, but nobody seems to disagree. He's the one who says it, but nobody seems to disagree. Actually, you're right. Right. Tosfot say that. That in this case, there's no. This is unanimous. Nobody disagrees. The sages disagree with Rabbi Yehuda only in case of a ship which is 10 tfachim above the surface of the sea. Okay, but in this case, nobody disagrees. Okay, Amar Rav Huna, Hane Beitziyata de Meishan. These small boats of Meishan, and according to Rashi, these are small boats. Uh, yeah, name of place, and they used it there. And these boats were wide at the top, but narrowed to a point at the bottom, like a canoe. Canoe, a canoe. Right at the bottom, it's very very narrow. So that's why it cannot be considered a private domain, because a private domain, the definition is an area of 4 by 4 tfachim surrounded by walls. Here at the bottom, there's not even 4 by 4 tfachim. It's just something. So it's so narrow. So it cannot be considered a private domain unless it says en metaltalin ba'en ela be'arba. So one may not carry within that boat only in 4 amot like Carmelit, unless ולא המרן אלא שאין בפחות מ3-4. This is only in case where within 3 tfachim of the bottom, the boat does not yet have a width of 4 tfachim. When you go up 3 tfachim, at the height of 3 tfachim, the width is not yet 4 by 4 tfachim. It's so narrow at the bottom. 4 tfachim is like this, like 40 centimeters. Right, the maximum point, it is wider than 4 tfachim, but since the bottom is not that wide, so the walls are not considered walls of a private domain. So if it reaches a width of 4 tfachim at the height of 3 tfachim, that's fine. Right. So what, for it to be considered a private domain, you need that at a height of 3 tfachim from the bottom, there's a width of 4 tfachim. Yeah, in the middle. So, אבל יש בפחות מ3-4, if within 3 tfachim of the bottom of the boat there's a width of 4 tfachim, then it's a private domain. And also another way to render it a private domain, if he filled the bottom of the boat with reeds and willow branches, so that basically raises the floor to an area where the width is 4 tfachim, that's fine. Yeah, so it has, obviously the length has more than 4 tfachim. The problem is with the width. So once you raise the floor, so the floor begins at the width of 4 tfachim, then it's okay. You have 4 by 4. They live in them. Yeah, now these are very small, very unique, like a canoe. But now comes a challenge to this. Matkif Rav Nachman. Yeah, Vimalinu Kana Vilben, Leitlandba, right? He filled it with Matkif Rav Nachman. Velema good achit bechitza. Why don't we say apply the principle of extend the wall downward? And this is from the outside. Since the outside the walls are like on the top they're straight. As they go down, they become narrower. So why can't we just virtually extend them uh, vertically downward, and to say that from the bottom beneath the boat there is like a width of 4 tfachim, as if we virtually extend the walls downward and say that it's a private domain anyway, without these solutions. Don't we have this principle? Milotanya, we have a writer that says, Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Na'atz kaneh bershut harabim ubershut raskal. If somebody stuck a pole in the ground of a public domain, obviously the pole is very narrow, and on top of the pole there was a basket, 4 tfachim wide. And he threw an object from the public domain into that basket, v'zarak v'nachal gabav chayav. He is liable. How could that basket be considered a private domain? Apparently, for a private domain, there must be walls of 10 tfachim height, which within them there's 4 by 4 tfachim. Here there are no walls of 10 tfachim height. So we must say that it's because of the concept of good achit. We virtually lower the walls of the basket downward. Alma amrin good achit mechitza. We should extend the walls downwards to create an enclosure. So Hachanami here too, in these boats, why can't we apply the same principle? Yeah, this is the source for Sukkah as well. I'm sorry? No, but this basket is for Tfachim. Yeah, if it's less than 4 Tfachim, then it's Makom Ptor, then you're permitted. But in this case, the basket is 4 by 4 Tfachim. And not only is it considered the 4 by 4 tfachim, we make like virtual walls, and we consider it to be private domain. So here too, in these boats, we could also apply the same principle and say that the bottom of the boat is also a private domain, even though from inside it's narrow, but from the outside we could virtually continue the walls and say no limit. Private, yeah, private domain up to the sky. So Akanami, name a good achit mechitza. So let's here to extend it. So then Rav Yosef comes and challenges that. Matkif la Rav Yosef, velo shmiya lehu, did they not hear this other statement? Le'ad amar Rav Yehuda amar Rav, umatu b'mishum Rabbi Chia, v'tanya la, so there is a braita that says, v'chachamim potrim, the sage is exempt, the one who throws the object from the public domain into that basket, which means that the sages do not apply that principle of good achit. So it's a dispute. So maybe it's only an individual who says good achit, extend the walls downward, but the sages, the majority, do not accept that principle. But then comes Abaye and says, how can you say that? Amar li Abaye, v'at lo tisbera. Do you not think that it's a unanimous concept to extend the walls downward? V'atanya, but we have a braita that says, Amud, Birshut Arabim, if there is a post in the public domain, Gavoa Asara, it's 10 tfachim high, and the top is wide 4 by 4 tfachim, Rachav Arba'a, but the end Beitaro Arba, its base is not 4 tfachim wide, its base is narrower. V'yesh bakatzar shelo shlosha, and its narrow part is 3 tfachim high. V'zarak v'nachal gabav chayav, so if one threw an object from the public domain and it landed on the post, one is liable. How can he be liable? If there, at the top of the post there are walls of 4 by 4 tfachim, but at the bottom of the post it's narrower. So how can you? The walls do not seem to be all the way the height of 10 tfachim. So what must we say? That, and this is unanimous. This is by the sages agreed to this also. Alma amrinan gudachit mechista. So we say that we do extend virtually the post. The wider part of the post has 4 by 4 tfachim, and we say that these wide walls extend virtually downward all the way, and it's like a private domain. So achanami gudachit mechista. So then the question, and Abai comes to explain, if all agree that in this post we do apply this principle of gudachit, how come in the case of the basket there's a dispute? Why do the sages not apply it there? So Midairya says Abaye, Hata mavya la mechita, she'agdaim bokin ba. There, in the case of the basket, the reason the sages do not accept that principle is because such an extension of the walls would be a wall through which kids penetrate. And in such a case, the sages do not apply the principle of gudachit. If you would say that there's a virtual wall and still you see kids going through, they say it's right. So even virtual, there's a limit to what can you do virtually. So it only works in a case where kids do not penetrate. Only if it's less than 3 tfachim, then kids cannot penetrate. But Eruv is different. That's a rabbinic thing. So here we talk about the biblical definition of a private domain. So is it the biblical concept of gudachit? Oh, so here, oh, right. So Rashi explains here that this post, the gap between the narrow part and the wide part is not so big. So even the narrow part is wide enough to prevent kids from going through. And that's why here the sages agree that we do apply the principle of gudachit. But in case of the basket, since it's a very narrow pole, and the kids can go through, so there the sages do not say that. So that's why in the case of the boat, says Abaye, all should agree that we should apply the principle of gudachit. So now the Gemara is asking, but what about the boat? Amar li Rav Acha Brei de Rav Acha le Rav Ashi, gabe shchina nami ayika beki adagim. What about the penetration by fish? If the sages do not agree to say gudachit to virtually extend the wall in case where the kids go through, if kids penetrated, why would they say so if fish penetrated? Yeah, but if fish go through, so then it seems like the reason of the sages is you cannot say you cannot say that there's a virtual wall there if creatures go through. So why should it be matter if it's fish or kids? No, I understand that the reason they don't say it in case where kids go through is because it would be how would you say that? Chucha veitlula. It would be like a funny thing to say that this is considered a wall, halachically a wall, if you see that the kids go through. Right. Exactly. Yeah. And the fish just go. So Rashi says the difference is another difference that the fish we just don't see. It's under the water, so we don't see it. So that's why we can ignore the fish and not ignore the kids. And that's what he says. Penetration by fish is not considered penetration in regard to nullifying a wall extended downward, because the fish passing through the extension are not visible to us. That's how Rashi explains it. And it brings the proof that we actually do say that in the water. How do you know this? The Rabbi Tavla asked Rav, a suspended wall. What about permitting to carry in a ruin? And Rashi says many cases in a ruin, often there are remnants of its walls suspended from its roof. So can we view these suspended walls like a whole wall, which creates a private domain, or maybe because it's a bridge, maybe it should be considered like a public domain? ואמר לי, אין מחיצת תלויה מתכת, a suspended wall does not permit carrying within the area enclosed by it, except for אלא במים, in case of water. If the suspended wall goes down to the water, then we accept it. That's a wall. And Rashi brings the case from Eruvin in case of exustra, a balcony over the water. So we say that there's like a suspended wall, and you can draw water from the sea into the private domain, because it's a special leniency that the sage is allowed in water. Now, how can you apply that? What about the penetration by fish? So that's a proof that penetration by fish is not considered, does not nullify the virtual wall. Which would be visible, and that could be visible. According to Rashi, maybe it's unusual, because according to Rashi, that's the thing. If it's not visible, it's not a problem. But if you can see the diver, so might be a problem. And now we continue to analyze the Mishnah. The Mishnah spoke about ships that are tied together, and it says that we may carry objects from one ship to another ship. And the question is, Pshita, of course, since each ship is a private domain, so what's the problem to carry between two private domains? So the Mishnah does not even need to mention that such a permission. So Rava tries to say that Lo Nitzrecha says it's indeed obvious that one may carry between the ships. The permission is, the novelty is, that one is permitted even to carry between the ships by way of a small boat wedged between them. That although the boat could slip from between the ships and cause carrying between them to be prohibited, one is nonetheless permitted to carry between them as long as the boat is there. Right. No, through that small boat, you can go down from the ship to the small boat and then up to the other ship. So while that small boat is there, like footnote 5, they say, while that small boat is there between the ships, the three constitute an unbroken expanse of Reshut HaYachid, private domain. One is therefore permitted to carry from one ship to the other by way of the Beitzit. However, since the Beitzit, that small boat, is not tied, it could slip from between the other ships. Were that to occur, transfer between the ships would be prohibited, for the water between them has a status of Carmelit, and one is forbidden to carry through the airspace of Carmelit. The Mishnah teaches that we're not concerned that might happen, and as long as the small boat is there, you can. Yeah, as long as all three of them are private domain and they're right, even though it's not tied, it's still fine. But this interpretation does not seem to fit to the wording of the Mishnah itself. So Amali Rav Safra, Moshe, Shafir Ka'amalta, he calls Rava Moshe. We do not know that his name was Moshe. But Rashi says that he called him Moshe like Rabbeinu Bedoro ke Moshe Bedoro. You are in our generation like Moshe Rabbeinu in his generation. So he says, are you saying, well, metaltelin mizol ezotnan, but the Mishnah says you can carry from this ship to that ship. And this implies that only Mishnah speaks about the direct transfer, not through another small boat. So therefore, El Amar Rav Safra, the novelty in the Mishnah is Lo nitzrecha ela le'arev uletaltel mizol ezot. The permission is that one may make an eruv. If each ship belongs to another person, and if we have two adjacent private domains, each one belongs to another person, so there's a rabbinic prohibition to carry between them unless they make an eruv. They join together with the food, like eruvei chatzerot, shitufei mevaot. So that's the permission of the Mishnah. So what's the novelty? So now we say that the Mishnah is discussing two ships having different owners, and the rabbis decreed that one is prohibited to, one might, uh, one might have thought that the rabbis instituted a roof only in the case of a private domain that is rooted in its place, such as a house or a courtyard, but not in the case of a boat, a mobile. So that's the novelty. Alternatively, one might have thought that since the two ships are not joined by a passage, by a door, they cannot be joined by an eruv, since an eruv generally requires the existence of a passage between the two domains. So the Mishnah teaches that in case of ships, it's not required, and they are eruvable. Ships are eruvable. No, there we said that was Rava's explanation, but then we said that the novelty was that even though if the middle boat would be go away, then there's going to be a prohibition to carry from one ship to the other because the area while it's there, it's there. Yeah, but then the assumption was that they all belong to the same person, so then there's no need for a rule. So then there's no question that was obvious. All private domains belong to the same person, so you can carry from one to the other. No, if two private domains belong to two different people, in order to carry from one to the other, they must make an eruv. No, no, not the erect. Eruv means to join in. In the case where we the middle boat, so the case there is that they all belong to the same person. So there's no question to eruv. The novelty was that there's a permission to transfer between the ships, even though there might have been a concern that the middle boat might go away, and then there's going to be a prohibition to transfer in the airspace of the Carmelit. That was one explanation. That was Rava's explanation. But now we have another explanation that we talk about two boats that belong to two different owners, and the novelty is that you can make an eruv even between boats, between ships. As the following Braita says, "Sfinot kshurot zo bezo," when we have ships that are tied together, me'arvin, they can make an eruv, umetaltelin mizol and then carry from one to the other. Nifseku, what if the ships were separated? Somebody cut the ropes or untied the ropes. Ne'esru, so now there's a prohibition to carry because the separation negates the eruv. And eruv can only join adjacent private domains. Private domain separated by a Carmelit or a public domain cannot be joined by an eruv. So if it's owned by one person, uh, as long as the ships are adjacent, even without being tied, you can carry between one and the other. So if it's less than three tefachim, it's still fine. It's like connected. Like yeah. Uh, but then chazru v'nikshuru. What if they were tied again on Shabbat? On Shabbat they were tied again. Ben shogegin or ben mezidin, whether inadvertently or even deliberately. Ben anusin or ben matin, whether unwillingly or accidentally. Chazru le'itaran harishon. They revert back to their original permit. The iruv automatically reestablished, and one is permitted to carry again between the ships. So we see that the law of iruv applies to ships. No, it doesn't matter. As long as it holds them together, it's fine. Um, so of course it must be such a knot that can hold them together. But here the baita means even if they were retied with a permanent knot, which is biblically forbidden together, it still reestablishes the iruv. They don't go off the ship on Shabbat. Right, because no, that's another concept of not to go beyond the boundary. Because if they came on Shabbat from outside 2,000 amot, right? So then they can't go there. But if they, not a problem, not to. Okay, then it says another novelty that even though something forbidden was done on Shabbat, it nevertheless permits something. V'chen machzalot haprushot. If there are mats that are hung to form cubicles in the public domain, like they have now in the kotel, they have now like these mats, different sections. So if different individuals were present in different between these different partitions. Each one had his own private domain. So me'arvinu metaltelin mizalza, they can make an eruv and join together and permit themselves to carry between one private domain to another. They're all adjacent private domains. But niglalu, if the mat during Shabbat rolled up, so then ne'esru, the area becomes forbidden for carrying because it reverts back to a public domain. Chazru v'nifresu, if these mats once again hung on Shabbat, ben shogegin, whether inadvertently, ben mezidin, or even deliberately. Of course, so even if it was done deliberately, and the forbidden labor was done on Shabbat, nevertheless, it reverts back the permissible status and permits them to carry. So soon the Gemara is going to ask about this. Right, it was there at the answer of Shabbat. And, yeah, but then it was rolled up, and then somebody put it back down, so it reestablishes the permission to carry. Ben shogegin, ben mezidin, ben anusin, ben mutin, whether unwillingly or accidentally, they revert back to their original permit, and they may carry again between these private domains. Why? Because the principle is, the Bible says, shekol mechitza shena'asa b'Shabbat, any partition that was made on Shabbat, was erected on Shabbat, ben b'shogeg, ben b'mezid, whether inadvertently or even deliberately, shma mechitza, it's considered a partition. So although these mats were rehung on Shabbat, they are regarded as valid partitions and permit carrying between them, like between any other two private domains. The Eruv goes back and forth.
That's interesting. Only you store it with a reason. But you can't just
Right.
make the fence.
Yeah, the case was that they just rolled up, so they're still hanging there, and then they just spread them down. We don't. Yeah, of course, you can prepare an Eruv and Shabbat. But and this too, these partitions also are not supposed to be rehung. But if it was done, so if the Eruv was repaired on Shabbat, it should revert the permission. Yeah. Yeah. On Shabbat. Now comes the question on this. How could it be that if it was done deliberately, somebody desecrated Shabbat deliberately, how can we benefit from that forbidden labor? And that's the next question. And is that so? The Amar Rav Nachman said that a partition erected on Shabbat is only considered a partition only to the stringent aspect of it, but not to the lenient aspect of it. So it's only considered a partition to be stringent and to say that the one who throws an object from the public domain into that area surrounded by that partition is liable for throwing from a public domain to a private domain. So for that stringent aspect, it's considered a partition, even though it was made on Shabbat, but not to be lenient. But to carry within the area, it's forbidden. And the Bible seems to say that it does not matter whether it was done deliberately or inadvertently. So the answer is, Ki itmar de Rav Nachman, Amazid itmar. Rav Nachman only spoke about a case where the partition was erected deliberately. In case it was erected deliberately, so the baita does not mean to permit carrying in that area. It's only significant, it's only considered a partition to say that one is liable for throwing an object from a public domain into that area. But the baita means is if it was done inadvertently or unwillingly or accidentally, in that case, it's even permits. There's even a lenient aspect that one is permitted to carry within the area surrounded by the partition.
It says deliberate murder or not deliberate. It's the same.
No, so the same should apply to the tents. Also, yeah, the tents. Yes, in all cases, if a partition was made deliberately on Shabbat, so it's only considered the partition to the stringent aspect, not to the lenient aspect. And now back to the two ships that are tied together. So Amar Shmuel said, "Va'afilu kshurat b'chut asar bal." What kind of a rope is required? Not too strong, even if they're tied together with no more than a string of a cloak, which is only a thin cord. One may nonetheless carry from one to the other. Obviously, on Shabbat, one should not do a permanent. What? If it did, so then it does not permit to carry between them. Now Shmuel speaks about how should they be prepared before Shabbat to permit carrying between them. They should be tied together. It says even with such a simple cord. And the question is, what exactly does it mean? Eichidami. If that thin cord is sufficient enough to hold the ships in place, so then pshita, then it's obvious. Why does Shmuel even need to say that? Obvious. If that thin cord is not sufficient to hold the ships together and they might become untied, so then how could it permit carrying between them? Well, the answer is Laulam the Yachol Amidan. Of course, we must have a rope or a cord that is able to hold the ships together in place. Without that, there's no permission to establish an eruv or to carry between them. And if so, what was Shmuel's novelty by mentioning this cord, string of a cloak? Any cord that can hold the ships together is fine. Shmuel just wanted to exclude from another case where a metal chain is required. He just came to exclude this ruling from another ruling of himself, that none, we have a Mishnah in Masechet Kelim, I'm sorry, Orlot, Masechet Orlot, um, and that Mishnah speaks about tum'ah, corpse tum'ah, that is brought from a tent to a ship. And it says, if one tied the ship with something able to hold it in place, and that, as Shmuel explains, it's an iron chain, and that mevila tum'ah, that can bring tum'ah to the ship. Since this cable itself acquires the same level of tum'ah as the corpse, it's a special thing about the metal barzel, about iron, that it's like the corpse itself, it's avi avota tum'ah, so that can even render the ship itself in some cases tameh. But bedavar she'en ma'amida, if it tied the ship with something unable to hold it, if it's not this iron chain, ein mevila tum'ah, does not bring the tum'ah to the ship. The Amar Shmuel there explained that the only thing that brings tum'ah to the ship is shekshura b'shalshelet shel barzel. It's just an iron chain. Only that will bring the tum'ah to the ship. So there, it's only that. L'inyan tum'ah hu dichtiv b'chalal cherev. There the verse says b'chalal cherev, the body of someone felled by a sword. Cherev areu kechalal. This verse teaches that the sword, which is made of iron, a metal sword, has the same status as the body itself. Avi avota tum'ah. That can bring the tum'ah to the ship in. But here, l'inyan Shabbat, anything that can connect the two ships together, any cord, once it's able to hold the ships, even the string of a cloak is sufficient. That's what Shmuel wanted to emphasize, not. Well,
So you should actually make sure the road is strong enough.